Today, I'm going to tell you about one of the most famous creepypasta stories on the internet. The story is as horrible as its name. Jeff and his family had just moved to a new neighborhood. His father got a promotion at work, and they thought it would be better to live in one of those higher-class neighborhoods. Jeff and his brother Lou couldn't complain about a new and better house. What's not to love? While they were unpacking, a neighbor came over to meet them and said, "Hi, I'm Barbara and I live across the street. Well, I just wanted to introduce myself to you and my son." She turned and called out to her son, "Billy, these are our new neighbors." Billy said hi, ran back into the yard, and went back to playing. Jeff's mother said, "Well, I'm Margaret. This is my husband Peter and my two children, Jeff and Lou." Getting to know each other, Barbara soon invited them to her son's birthday. Jeff and Lou were ready to turn her down when their mother said they'd love to come. So when they finished unpacking, Jeff went to his mother and said, "Mom, why would you accept an invitation to a party? I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm not a little kid anymore." She then replied firmly, "Jeff, we've just moved here. We should show that we want to spend time with our neighbors. We're going to the party and that's it." Jeff started to speak but then stopped, knowing he couldn't do anything about it. When his mother said something, that was the end of it. He walked to his new room, threw himself on the bed, sat there, and stared at the ceiling when suddenly he felt something strange. Not like pain, but a strange feeling. He dismissed it as just any old feeling, heard his mother calling him from downstairs to get his things, and went downstairs. The next day, Jeff went downstairs to have breakfast and go to school. When he sat down to eat, he had the same strange feeling as the day before, only now it was stronger. He felt a small pain like a tug, but ignored it once again. As soon as he and his brother had finished their coffee, they walked to the bus stop. They sat down to wait for the bus. Then, out of nowhere, a boy on a skateboard jumped over them just a few centimeters above their heads. They both jumped in surprise. "What the fuck?" they said. The boy looked about 12, a year younger than Jeff. He was wearing an Aeropostale t-shirt and ripped blue jeans. The boy turned around and walked over to them. He bounced on the edge of the skateboard and grabbed it with his hand, saying, Well, looks like we've got some new meat on the block." Suddenly, two other kids appeared. One was super skinny, and the other was huge. The boy said sarcastically, "Well, since you're new here, we'd like to introduce ourselves. That's Keith over there." Jeff and Lou looked at the skinny boy. He looked like a slob. "And the other one is Troy," the boy added. They looked at the fat man. He was a well-stopper. That kid shouldn't have exercised since he started crawling. The boy on the skateboard said, "And I'm Randy. Now let me explain. For all the kids in this neighborhood, there's a small bus fare, if you know what I mean." Lou stood up, ready to punch the kid until he turned inside out. When Keith pulled out a knife and pointed it at him, Randy said, No, I thought you guys would be more cooperative, but it looks like we're going to have to do it the hard way." The boy went over to Lou and took his wallet out of his pocket. Jeff had that feeling again. Now it was really strong, an almost uncontrollable burning sensation. Jeff stood up, but Lou asked him to sit down again. He ignored it and walked towards the boy and said, "Listen here, you little punk. Give me back my brother's wallet, or..." Randy put the wallet in his pocket, pulled out his knife, and said, "Oh, and what are you going to do?" As soon as he finished his sentence, Jeff punched the boy in the nose. When Randy tried to touch his face, Jeff grabbed his wrist and broke it. Randy screamed and Jeff grabbed the knife out of his hand. Troy and Keith ran to catch Jeff, but he was too fast. He threw Randy to the ground. Keith tried to attack him, but Jeff ducked and stabbed the knife into his arm. Keith dropped his knife and fell to the ground screaming. Troy also tried to attack him, but Jeff didn't even need the knife. He punched Troy straight in the stomach and he fell to his knees. When he fell, he vomited on the floor. Lou could do nothing but stare admiringly at his brother. They saw the bus coming and knew they would be blamed for everything, so they started running as fast as they could. As they ran, they looked back and saw the bus driver running towards Randy and the others. The two of them ran to the school without daring to say anything about it. They just sat and watched the lessons. Lou thought it was just his brother hitting some kids, but Jeff knew it was something more. and it was scary. When he had that feeling and saw how powerful it was, the only thing he wanted to do was hurt someone. He didn't like the sound of it, but he couldn't help feeling happy. Jeff felt that strange feeling fade away, and it didn't return for the rest of the day at school. Even when he was walking home because of the whole thing, near the bus stop, and since he probably wouldn't be taking the bus anymore, he felt happy. When they got home, his parents asked him how their day had been, and he said in a slightly sinister voice, "It was a great day." The next morning, Jeff heard someone knocking on the front door. He went downstairs and found 2 policemen at the door, with his mother looking at him very angrily. Then she said, "Jeff, these policemen are telling me that you attacked 3 children, and that it wasn't a normal fight. They were stabbed. Stabbed, son." Jeff looked at the ground, showing his mother that it was true. In his defense, he said, "Mom, they had knives and they pointed them at Lou and me." One of the policemen said, "Son, we found 3 children, 2 stabbed, another with a bruise on his stomach, and we have witnesses that you were at the scene. What do you have to tell us?" Jeff knew it was useless. He could say that he and Liu had been attacked, but there was no proof that it wasn't them who had attacked first. They couldn't say they weren't running away, because truth be told, they were. So Jeff and Liu couldn't defend themselves. Jeff's mother said, "Son, call your brother." But Jeff couldn't do that. Knowing that only he had hit the boys, he said, "Sir, it was me. I'm the one who hit the boys. Liu tried to hold me back, but he couldn't stop me." The policeman looked at his partner, and they both nodded, and he said, "Look, kid, that'll be a year in the juvenile detention center." "Wait," said Liu. Everyone looked up the stairs to see him holding a knife. The policemen took out their guns and pointed them at Liu, who said, "I did it. I beat up those fucking punks. I have the marks to prove it." He raised his sleeves to reveal cuts and bruises as if he were in a fight. The policeman said, "Son, put the knife down." Leo loosened his fingers and let it fall to the ground. He put his hands up and walked over to the policeman. "No, Liu, it was me. I did it," Jeff said, tears streaming down his face. Liu said, smiling, "Poor little brother, trying to take the blame for what I did. Well, take me away." The policeman led Liu to the car. Jeff begged, "Liu, tell them it was me. Tell them it was me who hit those kids." Jeff's mother put her hand on his shoulder and said, "Please, Jeff, you don't have to lie. We know it was Liu. You can't stop it. Don't make this any harder than it already is." Jeff watched helplessly as the car sped off with Liu in it. A few minutes later, their father parked in front of the house, and seeing Jeff's face, he knew something was wrong. After an hour of crying in the garage, Jeff returned home and saw that his parents were both shocked, sad, and disappointed. He couldn't look at them. He couldn't see that they thought it was Liu's fault. He went to sleep, trying to get the whole thing out of his mind. 2 days passed, with no news of Liu from prison. There were no friends to go out with, nothing but sadness and guilt. That is, until Saturday, when Jeff was woken up by his mother with a happy face saying, "It's today, Jeff," she said as she opened the curtains and let a flood of light into Jeff's room. Waking up, he asked what was so special about the day. She said, "Well, it's Billy's party." Jeff was fully awake to say, "Mom, you're kidding, right? You don't expect me to go to a children's party after what happened." She sat up in bed and said, "Jeff, we both know what happened. I think this party could be the thing that brightens up the days gone by. Now go and get dressed." She left the room and went to get ready. Jeff struggled to get up. He grabbed some shirts and jeans and went downstairs. He saw his father and mother well-dressed, his mother in a dress, and his father in a suit. And he thought, why do they always wear such fancy clothes to a children's party? "Son, is that all you're going to wear? Better wear something better," said Jeff's mother, hiding her desire to shout with a smile. "You could dress better if you want to make a good impression," said his father. Jeff grunted and went back to his room saying, "I don't have any fancy clothes." He looked around in his closet for what he called a costume. He found a pair of black pants he had for special occasions and a t-shirt. He couldn't find a shirt to go out in. Jeff looked around and only found striped and patterned shirts, none that matched his pants. Finally, he found a white sweatshirt lying on a chair and put it on. They walked across the street to Barbara and Billy's house. They knocked on the door and found Barbara, who, like her parents, was extravagantly dressed. As they walked into the house, Jeff only saw adults, not children. "Jeff, the children are in the yard. How about you go and meet them?" said Barbara. He went out into the garden, which was full of children. They were running around in strange cowboy costumes and shooting at each other with plastic guns. Suddenly, a boy came up to him and handed him a toy gun and a hat and asked, "Hey, do you want to play?" Jeff replied, "Not really, brat. I'm too old for that stuff." The boy looked at him with a pitying face and begged him. Jeff agreed, put on his hat, and started pretending to shoot the children. At first, he thought it was a ridiculous idea, but then he started to enjoy himself. It may not have been super cool, but it was the first time he had done something that took his mind off Liu. Jeff played with the children for a while, until he heard a noise. A strange, rolling noise. Then something hit him. Randy, Troy, and Keith jumped over the fence. Jeff dropped the fake gun and ripped off his hat. Randy looked at Jeff with a burning hatred and said, "Hey Jeff, we have some unfinished business." Jeff looked at his bruised nose and replied angrily, "I think we're even. I gave you a beating and you sent Lou to the detention center." Randy had fury in his eyes and didn't want to negotiate. "Oh no, I don't play to draw, I play to win. You might have finished us off the other day, but not today." Jeff ran and Randy went after him and they both fell to the ground. Randy punched Jeff in the nose while he grabbed him by the ears and headbutted him. Jeff pushed Randy away and they both got up. The children were screaming and their parents were running out of the house. Troy and Keith pulled guns from their pockets. "Nobody moves or guts will fly," they said. Randy pulled out a knife and stabbed Jeff in the shoulder, who screamed and fell to his knees. Randy started kicking him in the face. After 3 kicks, Jeff grabbed Randy's foot and twisted it, causing Randy to fall to the ground. Jeff got up and ran towards the back door, but Troy grabbed him. He grabbed Jeff by the collar and threw him back into the yard through the door. As Jeff tried to stand up, he was kicked to the ground again. Randy started kicking Jeff repeatedly until he started coughing up blood. Randy said, "Come on, Jeff, fight me." He picked Jeff up and threw him into the kitchen. Randy saw a bottle of vodka on the counter and smashed the glass over Jeff's head. "Come on, Jeff, look at me." Jeff looked up with a face full of blood. "I'm the one who sent your brother to the detention center, and now you're just going to sit there and let him rot there for a whole year? You should be ashamed of yourself," Randy said. Jeff started to get up. Jeff was standing with blood and vodka on his face. Once again, he got that strange feeling, the one he hadn't felt for a while. "Finally, he's up," Randy said as he ran towards Jeff. Something inside Jeff happened. His psyche was destroyed. All rational thought was gone. All he could do was kill. Then he grabbed Randy and knocked him to the ground. He stood over him and punched him straight in the chest where his heart was. The punch caused Randy's heart to stop. Jeff hit him punch after punch, and blood began to pour out of Randy's body until he took his last breath and died. Everyone was looking at Jeff. Despite their astonishment, Troy and Keith pointed their guns at Jeff, who ran for the stairs. As he ran, the two opened fire on him, all their shots missing. Jeff ran up the stairs and heard Troy and Keith following him. As they fired their last bullets, Jeff ran into the bathroom, grabbed the towel rail, and ripped it off the wall. Troy and Keith ran into the bathroom with their knives ready. Troy moved his knife towards Jeff, who stepped back and hit him in the face with the towel rail. Then there was only Keith, who was more agile than Troy, and dodged when Jeff tried to hit him with the towel rail. He dropped the knife and grabbed Jeff by the neck and pushed him against the wall. A chemical that looked like chlorine was on the shelf and fell on both of them. They both felt their skin burn and started screaming. Jeff wiped his eyes as best he could and pulled out the towel rail, hitting Keith straight in the head. And before Keith bled to death, he let out a sinister smile. "What's so funny?" Jeff asked. Keith took out a lighter and lit it. "What's funny? It's that you're covered in bleach and alcohol." Jeff's eyes widened as Keith threw the lighter at him. As soon as the lighter made contact with him, the flame started. As the alcohol burned him, the chlorine bleached his skin. Jeff screamed terribly as he burst into flames. He tried to roll out of the fire, but it was no use as the alcohol had turned him into a walking hell. He ran down the corridor and fell down the stairs. Everyone started screaming when they saw Jeff fall to the floor, almost dead. The last thing Jeff saw was his mother and the other parents trying to put out the flames. That's when he passed out. When Jeff woke up, he had a plaster cast wrapped around his face. He couldn't see anything, but he felt a cast on his shoulder and stitches all over his body. He tried to get up, but he realized that there were some tubes in his arm. When he tried once more, he fell over, and a nurse rushed over to help him, while putting him back in his bed and reinserting the catheter in his arm, saying, "I don't think you can get out of bed yet." Jeff sat there with no vision, no idea of what was around him. Finally, after hours, he heard his mother asking him if he felt all right, but Jeff couldn't answer, as his face was covered in plaster. To reassure him, she revealed, "Oh dear, I have great news. After all the witnesses said that Randy had attacked you, the police decided to let Liu go." This made Jeff almost jump. "He'll be out tomorrow, and then you two can be together again," she said as she hugged him goodbye. The next few weeks consisted of Jeff being visited by his family, until the day his bandages were due to be removed. His family was there to see what he looked like now. When the doctors removed the bandages from Jeff's face, everyone was on the edge of their seats. They waited until the last bandage on Jeff's face was removed. "Let's hope for the best," said the doctor. He quickly pulled off the last cloth, leaving Jeff's face exposed. Margaret screamed at the sight of her son's face. Lou and his father looked at him in horror. Astonished, Jeff asked, What happened to my face?" He quickly got up, ignoring the dizziness, and ran to the bathroom. He looked in the mirror and saw the cause of everyone's distress: his face. Jeff's face was hideous. His lips were burnt a deep shade of red. His face had turned a pure white color and his scorched hair from brown to black. He slowly put his hand to his face. It was as if he were touching a leather cloth. Jeff looked back at his family and then at the mirror, until Liu, trying to defuse the situation, said, "It's not that bad." Jeff replied, "It's not so bad. It's perfect." His whole family was surprised. Jeff started laughing uncontrollably, while his parents noticed that his left eye and hand were shaking. They asked him if he was all right, and he replied, "Fine, I've never been happier. Look at me. This face suits me perfectly." He couldn't stop laughing. Jeff looked at himself in the mirror as he stroked his face, admiring it. What caused it? Well, you'll remember that when Jeff was fighting Randy, something in his mind became corrupted, and this time, it had been permanent. Now he was left as an uncontrolled killing machine, and his parents were unaware of it. Concerned, Margaret asked, "Doctor, is my son all right in the head?" The doctor replied, "Oh yes, this behavior is typical for patients who take large quantities of painkillers. If his behavior doesn't change in a few weeks, bring him back here and we'll do psychological tests on him." Thanking the doctor, Margaret called everyone together, saying it was time to go home. Jeff looked away from the mirror while his face still formed a crazy grin. His mother held him by the shoulders and took him to get his clothes from the counter girl. Margaret looked down to see the black pants and white sweatshirt her son had worn on the day of the party, which were now clean of blood and stitched up. She took Jeff to his room and made him put on the same clothes. Then they left the hospital without knowing that they were taking someone else home. Later that night, Jeff's mother woke up to a sound coming from the bathroom. It sounded as if someone was crying. She slowly walked over to see what it was. When she looked into the bathroom, she saw a horrifying sight. Jeff had taken a knife and carved a smile on his face. Frightened, she asked him, "Jeff, what are you doing?" Jeff looked at her and said, "I couldn't keep smiling, Mom. It hurt after a while, but now I can smile forever." Margaret noticed that Jeff's eyes were ringed in black and said, "Jeff, your eyes." He said, "I couldn't see my face. I started to get tired and my eyes started to close. I burned my eyelids so that I could see myself forever, so that I could see my new face." Jeff's mother slowly began to walk away, seeing that her son was crazy. But he asked her, "What's wrong, Mom? Aren't I handsome?" She replied, "Yes, son, you're beautiful. Let me go and call your father so he can see your beautiful face." She ran into the bedroom and shook Jeff's father out of his sleep, trying to tell him to get his gun. But before she could finish, she stopped when she saw Jeff in the doorway holding a knife. the same knife he had used to carve her face. "Mom, you lied!" That was the last thing the two of them heard as Jeff ran towards them with the knife stabbing them both. His brother Liu was startled awake by some noise, and then he heard nothing more. He just closed his eyes and tried to go back to sleep. While Liu was on the edge of sleep, he had the strange feeling that someone was watching him. He looked up before Jeff's hand covered his mouth. Slowly, Jeff raised the knife, ready to plunge it into Liu as he struggled to escape. Jeff said his last words to his living brother, "Shh, go to sleep. If you want more creepypasta content, subscribe to the channel. We'll have a playlist dedicated to creepypasta. See you in the next video, or not."